The fourth spiritual president. Okay, listen to this podcast if you're interested in knowing who the fourth spiritual president is and why. And also at the end, where I reveal why 5 is my lucky number for presidents. Okay, the first spiritual president was George Washington because he represented a nation founded on spiritual principles. I mean, the idea was radical at the time that all people, they said all men, but obviously all people is what it should be, are created equal, and just the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, these were radical spiritual induced ideas at the time. And George Washington, I don't think was as much an intellectual as some of them, but he was manifested as kind of a representative of this type of thinking of the birth of democracy. So George Washington was the first spiritual president. Abraham Lincoln was the second spiritual president because I've seen a lot of documentaries on him, and he actually had a few flaws, but he understood the spiritual principle of unity and that you have to see people as related and work hard to keep things together. In this case, he worked hard to keep the Union together. And Lincoln, to great sacrifice, he was actually obviously shot at the end of the war and unpopular in some circles. Is considered by many, if not most, to be our greatest president ever because he protected the country in terms of keeping it together at great cost. And he was not a harsh person. Like he tried to spare a lot of deserters from execution. He couldn't spare all of them, obviously, but he didn't want the South to have like very painful reparations. And he I think he was famous for like the cabinet of rivals. He basically was a storyteller, and he could bring out the best in people. He didn't he could be a little bit ruthless in politics when he had to be, but he was more of a kind of a not compromiser, but more of a collaborator to bring people together and win hearts and minds also. Although he was, like I said, he was ruthless in some ways, like he suspended a lot of human rights and did a lot of other things. Okay, the third spiritual president was Franklin Roosevelt because his fireside chats and his New Deal policies, which some people don't agree with, but at the time, you know, America was losing hope along with a lot of the rest of the world because of the Great Depression and, later on the entrance into World War II. But, people were in despair. I mean, people were committing suicide. People's life savings were wiped out. And, excuse me, we needed someone that understood that you needed to have a vision of recovery, not just economic recovery, but like personal redemption, personal renewal, personal spiritual awakening. And, FDR famously said there's nothing to fear but fear itself. I mean, he understood that, our nation was gripped by fear and people were panicked. That's why they call it the stock market panic, the stock market crash. And, excuse me. So Franklin Roosevelt was our I just ate and I got something stuck in my throat, so I apologize. So, Franklin Roosevelt was our third spiritual president. Now, drum roll, our fourth spiritual president is Joe Biden. I want to explain that. So, a lot of people love Donald Trump and a lot of people hate Donald Trump. Voters. So we're pretty much at a stalemate. But Biden recognizes, I think, a lot because of his natural inclination, but also the great losses he's had in his life, where his wife and one of his children, I believe, were killed in a car crash, and then his son Beau died. That he understands that you can't just. He understands the empathy and the suffering of other people, and he understands just politically that you can't force things through him. And I think that got accentuated with Trump. I mean, Trump not only lost re-election, um, you know, I mean, he did get a large number of votes, and it was fairly close. But being a one-term president is not that usual nowadays. Like I think maybe Carter was the last one because let's see, Obama was two-term president, George Bush was a two-term president. I guess his father was a one-term president. Bill Clinton was a two-term president. Reagan was a two-term president. But George Bush Sr. was only a one-term president. So Biden, he talks about unifying the country. He says he's going to work just as hard for the people that didn't vote for him as the people that did. And if you listen to, there's some things about Biden I don't actually like, but I think he is going to be one of our better presidents. And I think one of our very better presidents, perhaps. And I think that he does have a spiritual perspective. He understands that you have to work with people, and that like he said, he's going to work with Mitch McConnell. He's going to work with other people. He has a history of some people say too much, but he has a history of working with people he disagrees with. And I do basically agree with that. I think that there's a famous saying that says you don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. And I think that there are no real enemies in life. There's just strangers. I mean, some people are probably evil, like Hitler was probably evil, but so I'm not saying we should be like Chamberlain and just appease everything. That would be, the wrong extreme. But we do have to, God puts people in power. Like God put Trump in power. You might not agree with him, but he's people that are in power have to be, worked with to different degrees. And if Joe Biden came in and just said, I'm going to do what I want to do and forget the Republicans, forget, people that like Trump or people that oppose me, then he wouldn't get that far. He might not get that far anyway, but he might, because he has the opportunity to win over hearts and minds, and that's still possible, even though it's difficult. All right, so why is 5 my favorite number, and who's the fifth spiritual president? Well, I will say that this one comes very close to home, and you'll have to do a little research on me and what I believe to find out who the fifth spiritual president will be.